Jon, so great to see you again. It's great to have you for our leadership series here. Thanks for carving out the time. We'll get to this in a minute, but we're longtime friends. When did we first meet? I was trying to remember that. It was early 2000s.
Yeah, it was probably like 2002, 2003, because I've been in Nashville 10 years and we knew you in Atlanta for probably at least 3 or 4 years. So it's been, I would say, like 15 years.
It's crazy. So, and it's been amazing to see your journey. Thank you by the way, for your time today. We have this leadership group that we've just started here, and we're just trying to get better, and we're trying to integrate our faith into leadership. We talked about all sorts of different things, and I think you bring some unique cutting edge ideas that we're going to get to in a minute. I've watched some of your recent content. That's fantastic. You have a new book coming out. We'll talk about that as well. But for those in our audience who may not know you, Jon is a New York Times bestseller, authored 6 books for 20 plus years. You've been helping some of the largest brands in the world, Home Depot, Bose, Staples. You were on the Dave Ramsey team for a while and have worked significantly with them. You regularly speak to large audiences at conferences, colleges, companies, churches. And you've been on CNN and Fox News, so you don't discriminate.
Both sides.
Both sides of the aisle. You reach across.
Babies need shoes. They both, like, that money spends.
There you go. You've been on Good Day Good Day LA. But anyway, you have a big online presence, and you don't only just use this for your benefit. You've helped other people. You've built kindergartens in Vietnam, and you just do all sorts of amazing things. And so what I want people to know is generally, you're like, if they haven't heard of you, you're generally like one of the most amazing people they've ever met.
I'm definitely not the tallest. I'm not the tallest person they've ever met.
Well, everybody has their downsides, Jon. Everybody has their downsides.
I told my wife
I need to say this because you're going to bring up your wife. Jon and his wife, Jenny, who I knew before Jon. I actually knew her probably 5 or 10 years before I knew you. Jon and Jenny live in Nashville with their 2 amazing young girls that are how old now? How old are your girls?
14 and 17.
14 and 17. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So, so what were you going to say? You were just going to say something about your wife?
I was just going to say that I told my wife recently that if I had been taller, I don't think we would have gotten married. And she said, why? And I said, because I would have had to develop this personality. I could have just coasted on my height. But fortunately for both of us, I had to develop this winsome personality.
There you go.
To overcome my shortcomings. So, we joke about that all the time. This will be fun. I'm looking forward to this.
I look forward to the next time you're in town too, so that we can actually hang out this time. Because last time you skirted me. You were in town and you didn't even call me. So that's another conversation for another day. So you've been developing a lot of content, as a lot of people have, but you're a thinker and you're somebody who's great at analyzing and looking at data, but not only that, looking at trends and understanding culture. And you sort of have a unique ability to sort of blend all of those things together and look ahead. And so you've been talking a lot about, in fact, you were one of the earliest people that were talking about pivoting. As the whole world was talking about pivoting, you were talking about that early. In fact, I told you before we got on, I watched a fantastic presentation that impacted me and our leadership here at Mission as we've been pivoting in this season and what we're doing as a church. But you've sort of started going beyond that. In fact, you've developed some recent content called Beyond the Pivot. And I would love for you to just talk generally first about sort of the background specifically of that content and what sort of inspired you and what were you responding to specifically as you've been developing this content?
Yeah, I mean, I was responding to the idea that as far as Beyond the Pivot, there was a phase where we were kind of in a panic phase. We were like, we don't know what we're going to do. And we were in it's going to end soon phase. Like on March 15th, I texted my friend and said, I think the first half of the year is going to be tough for a lot of people. The first half, how adorable, how cute that I thought like in July we'd be like, that's a wrap. So there was a lot of people that had this like, okay, by summer or by late summer, by fall. And so we're still in this flux. And so that's where I said, okay, it's bigger than just you're pivoting one part of your business, one part of your life. You have to look beyond that. And how do you kind of lean into that? So I've been teaching teams, for instance, like you have to divide your calendar into 3s. So like 3 days is firm. I can plan 3 days out. 3 weeks is fuzzy. I still need to look at it. I still need to plan. 3 months out is fictional. So I go firm, fuzzy, fictional. And that gives me a greater sense, because if you want to be frustrated, try to make this year behave like last year, or try to guess what next year. And so I've been helping leaders go, okay, how do we get beyond this moment? How do we keep our heads up but still work on what we can actually work on today? That's where a lot of the content came from, is just dealing with people. And then the other thing I'd say, and I recommend this for a sermon series. I recommend this if you were going to launch a product, if you're an entrepreneur, there's 3 things you look for. You look for need. Do people really need it? Is there a need? The second thing you look for is a personal connection. Do I care about it? Am I personally connected to it? The third thing you do is you study the market. And you need all 3 of those. Because if you say you recognize one day, I have a huge passion and, there's nobody serving it in the marketplace, but nobody needs it. That's a hobby. You've got a really good hobby. Awesome. Have a hobby. If you look up and go, I found a need, I found something missing in the market, but I don't care about it, I'm not connected, that's a day job. You might do well with it, but you're not personally connected. And so that's the Venn diagram for me of new books, new talks, new things I develop. Same with like, if you said, okay, I see a need, I see a passion, but it's overserved in the market, that's a cake pop. Like right now, if you told me, John, I'm going to develop this new thing called cake pops, it would be like, dude, we've had those for like a decade. Like by the time they're in Starbucks, you've missed it. So I think any good idea, whether it's a sermon series, product you're launching, you go through those 3 things and you find that sweet spot. And so for me, whether that's the book Finish, my last book, whether that's my new book Soundtracks about overthinking, I put everything through that kind of Venn diagram, because then I know I'm serving real people. I'm connected to it. I'm going to push longer than I would if I didn't care about it. And there's actually a spot for me to fit into the market.
Wow. Dude, you're spitting gold nuggets already. I'm writing down notes. I'm probably going to take more notes than I am going to be conversing with you. So I'm going to try to make this a conversation, but I'm already taking notes. So I want to get to these. You have 3 tools that you have been training teams, talking with teams, consulting with teams on things that are necessary beyond the pivot. Could you take us through? I'd love to just talk through those. Let's jump into the first one. Let's talk through those tools really quickly, because I would like for our audience to be able to walk away with something that they could go back and consider themselves, or talk with their teams, or maybe introduce in their organizations that could really benefit them. And just so you know, one of our big goals in this leadership series is, what we want to do is we want to grow the influence of our leaders, so we grow the influence of the kingdom in our community. Sure. And so I feel like the more successful and the more helpful we can be to them, the more successful they're going to be, the greater influence they have, the more impact they're going to have in our community for Christ's kingdom. So give us some helpful tools. You have 3 specific ones that you like to talk about in terms of this season and building the future.
Yeah, the first one is endurance. Endurance, and you can define that a million different ways. It can be long-term success in the face of short-term stress. It can be taking small steps towards big goals. One of my favorite definitions is putting miles between you and your desire to quit. I always ask teams, how quick is your quit? And what I mean by that is, how small is the thing that knocks you off course have to be? How fast do you quit? How quick is your quit? So the first problem goes wrong, we're already quitting. And you have to know, no. Like I spoke with a team just the other day, and we were talking about, they were creating something they were worried people were going to have a negative response to. And we got to the place where we're like, good, like that's okay to some degree. Like if this is for your people and these people understand it, that's not a bad thing. Let's not make a quick quit. I don't want the people in the front lines to go, oh, this one person out of 1,000 was upset, so let's change the whole thing. And so that's what endurance is. And the 2 things that I really feel like lead to endurance are motivation and momentum. Like those things make endurance a lot easier. And the problem with motivation is we want it to be a feeling. We want it to be like a soulmate. Like we'll find one. We misinterpreted some great books about like your purpose and assume it's just one thing. Like it's just one true north, a vision quest. Like you meet leaders all the time that are like, I just don't have my one thing. And you're like, It's going to change. It's going to evolve. And so I like tactical motivation,
season, right?
Especially in this. Well, dude, I'm a public speaker. So what if my only motivation for that job was hearing laughter and engaging with people in live audience? I am screwed. Like that's not happening.
Yeah, right.
So like I like tactical motivation. I like what I call a portfolio of motivation. I think every leader should have 20 reasons they do the thing. 20 reasons that they're passionate about that thing. Because, dude, some days 10 of them won't even show up. And you're going to get to item number 18 and be like, oh, I'm so glad I had that. And so that's, for motivation, I really think that's important. A question I'd give every leader in this room is, who are you doing this very difficult job for? Like, who are you doing this difficult job for? I asked a group of CEOs of a hospital that question. And one of this, because that's a hard job. They don't get to say two sentences that you and I get to say. We get to say it's not brain surgery and it's not life or death. If you're a CEO of a hospital, you don't get to say those things. And your range of responsibilities goes from saving somebody's life to people are mad there's Pepsi in the vending machine. Like, it's a wide swath of responsibilities.
No doubt.
And the CEO said, I do this job for the donor walk. When somebody donates an organ, we, the administrators, the doctors, the nurses, we line the hall while they're wheeled to surgery and we cheer them on for the donor walk. And she said, that's why I do this job. And so I think those are the kind of things that when you face a season like this, you have to say, okay, what's my motivation list? Am I curating it? Or do I feel like most people think motivation will get bigger during a goal. Every bit of research says it disappears. It's the first thing to go. Motivation is so flighty. So you have to actively work on it, not just go, I hope I feel inspired today.
That's awesome. So tell me a little bit about you said motivation. That was brilliant on motivation. I love the idea of a portfolio motivation. Tell me a little bit more about momentum, because that's the other key. Tell me, how do you generate that momentum personally, and how do you maintain it?
Yeah, the greatest way to have momentum is to win often. Nothing creates momentum like a win. The problem is we have these huge valleys between us and the thing we're trying to accomplish. So a lot of times we go, oh, we're such a terrible instant gratification culture, instant gratification. Agreed, but let's just weaponize that. If we know we're wired that way, let's make that part of how we lead. I want to feed into that. I want shorter intervals between me and when I get to win. So when I, say running, for instance, I ran 1,000 miles last year. 5 miles out of 1,000 is depressing. So I couldn't measure it on a 1,000-mile scale. 5 miles out of 83 miles, which is a monthly total, it's a little better. 5 out of 21, which is a weekly total, now I feel good. Like, every time I run 5 miles, I'm almost 25% of that, done with that. So I tell people, shrink the year, shrink your goal, shorter intervals. Like, I want to win often, because that's what leads to momentum. If you say, okay, 3 months from now, we're going to launch a new product because this season is weird, like, you're essentially holding your breath for 3 months and you're hoping for this payoff. And I'd much rather you have wins along the way.
And it seems like the more momentum you have, the less stress it puts on your motivation. So that even when your motivation is waning, it's like, oh gosh, we got momentum though. So I don't need motivation right now. My motivation is we're succeeding, we're winning, we're doing well.
Well, and here's a caveat to that. So Frank Beeler, who works with Reggie Joyner, who we're both friends with, he used to run a sales department, and they changed the layout of the sales department where they got lower walls in the cubicles. And he realized that the first thing one of his sales team would do when they closed the deal was do a lap around the building, high five everybody, get a coffee, and they would let all that momentum dissipate. So he said, the first thing you have to do when you close a deal is call 10 other people. And their sales went through the roof because they were riding that wave of the momentum versus going, I had one good thing happen and I just let it dissipate. So sometimes it's you have that little win and you take those 5 things you've been putting off and you apply that momentum to it. So it's definitely a real thing that's fun to kind of figure out.
And so that even leads me to another thought. Like with an endurance, there is that long-term endurance, but there is even the endurance of not giving up till the end of the day. It's what I got to accomplish today so that I can win tomorrow, and what I got to accomplish this week so that I can set myself up for success next week. And so I just think that's a very powerful idea. Okay, let's move on to the second tool. The second tool is flexibility. Talk to me about your definition and thoughts on flexibility.
Well, flexibility is one of the most valuable things right now because we're all being forced to do things we weren't expecting to do. Nobody anticipated this. Nobody anticipated the skills they're going to have to learn. I think a great question to ask during this season is what would have made this easier, and then go build that. So what would have made this season easier? Okay, a year from now, I'll have that in place. Like for me, the answer, if somebody said to me, what would have made this season easier? Having a robust YouTube channel to share ideas as public speaking gets put on pause, having a studio, having a camera, knowing how to do that would have made things easier. Okay, I recognize that. I write that answer down, and then I go build that. I don't feel bad that I don't have it, but I figure it out. Like, for shame on us in a year from now if our companies don't all have Zoom policies and work from home policies and all the things. And so that's the flexibility. You have to be flexible enough right now to go, I got to grow, I got to stretch. And the problem is most people aren't afraid of change. They're afraid of looking foolish. So they're afraid of not being the expert. Like one of the big leadership tricks is the better you are at the old thing, the more resistant you are to the new thing. And it confuses us because we go, here's this amazing leader who's amazing at this old thing. And then we assume they'll be great at the next thing. They have more to lose. If you're terrible at the old way, you can't wait for the new way. But if you're proficient and an expert, and so one of the things I say when it comes to flexibility is you've got to be a tourist. Like you have to have the mindset of a tourist. And you go, okay, what do tourists have in common? One, they ask questions. They ask lots of questions. They're not embarrassed to ask questions. Number two, they don't pretend to be experts. If you don't get to learn if you pretend. Number three, they request help from experts. They reach out to experts. Number four, they make mistakes and they don't beat themselves up and they have fun. And so that's flexibility to me right now, is admitting we're all like, there's a chance that you've never done this before because we've all never done this before. So you have to be flexible.
Yeah. Yeah, I got to tell you, to tell a funny story on myself, I used to be a terrible tourist. And I think a lot of it had to do with my ego. Like when I went places, I wanted to know like what the best things are doing. I wanted to sort of be an expert. So I do research ahead of time and I get there and people be like, maybe we should ask somebody. I'm like, no. I know what we should do. I know where we should go. I know where we should eat. And we would leave and we would miss all sorts of things and the best experience. And then I finally decided like, that's my pride. Like I'm a moron. Like I'm stupid for not, if I show up in Nashville and you've lived there for a decade, I'm crazy to not say, John, while we're in Nashville, where should we eat? Where should we go? What should we do? Okay, I've heard about all these other things, but like you live there, you're an expert. Like, and so it's interesting in leadership, it's the same idea. We're all now going to places we've never been. Like we're experiencing things we've never experienced, but it's not true that nobody's experienced them. It is true that none of us have led in the middle of a pandemic, but there's lots of people who lead in times of uncertainty. There's lots of people who've tried to solve the problems in different scenarios that many of us are trying to solve now. And so I love that idea, that picture of being a tourist, because that idea of curiosity helps us learn.
Yeah, and that's a big part of the flexibility is curiosity. So for me, one of my ideas became, curiosity beats criticism. So if you as a leader, if your first response to a new idea is to attack it and critique it, I think you need to pause for a second, because it's often out of fear, it's often out of resistance. And instead of saying that'll never work here, changing it to, I wonder how that could work here. You and I, we had a ton of overlap, and I'll never forget that one of our friends, Julie Arnold, when they were doing big services, big plans for Christmas, for instance, she would deliberately not invite certain people that had to build the things because she knew they'd say no. Like they were so it was really hard for them to hear, we're going to make it snow in the sanctuary. Because then as the engineering mind would go, okay, well, what kind of temperature are we talking about? What is it, a liquid snow? Is it a dry snow? What are we doing? And it'd be really hard for them not to critique the idea versus go, what if we fill the entire auditorium with this? And so I think you have to be really deliberate to cultivate curiosity versus going, okay, I'm critiquing.
Yeah. I think also too, it's easy when you see other people to discount people's success. And again, I can be such a critic. This is why I'm saying this. And I remember years ago, another mutual friend, Andy Stanley, I remember him teaching us this phrase like, hey, be a student, not a critic. Be a student, not a critic. And I think a lot of times for me, I tend to see people succeed or see a situation and be like, oh, no, but that wouldn't work for us. Or that they're not being successful because they did that. It's because of something else. There's some other factor. And I don't know why I do that exactly, but I notice, and I don't know if it's jealousy or insecurity. It's probably some insecurity, but I see, I don't think I'm the only person. Like I think lots of people, we discount people's success, and instead of being a student, we talk about all the reasons why they're cheating or they've cut a corner or something like that.
Or they had to sacrifice something I wouldn't sacrifice.
Right.
Like that's the other,
Or they had some advantage I didn't have.
Yeah. Or like, well, they don't have kids. That's the
right.
I love when like dads and moms throw their kids under the bus. It's like, I would love to do this thing, but like whenever somebody tells me I've got a business idea I want to grow, but I don't want to become a workaholic parent that never sees his kids, they're essentially going, I'm too afraid to try it, so I'm going to pretend it's because I'm just being a great dad. And the kid is like, whoa, I didn't say, like, there's got to be more than two options. Either I don't do the thing God's put on my heart, or I become a workaholic parent that never sees. Like there's a
Right.
lot of room between those two things.
Yeah, of course. And clearly lots of people have done both. They've been
Yeah, I know
a
a
great
ton.
parent.
We've named 5.
Yeah. That's good. Okay, so the first two essentials for tools for building the future are endurance, flexibility. The third one's compassion. Talk to me about compassion. That's an interesting one, by the way. It's not one that I would have expected.
No, it's a curveball because you can't really yell compassion at somebody in like a CrossFit gym. Like endurance, you could be like endurance, flexibility. Compassion is weird. I just define compassion as kindness plus action. So it's kindness that always turns into action. And the reason I said that right now is that there's so many people that feel stuck, they feel afraid, and the good news is crisis magnifies kindness. The little things you do for your employees, your family, your neighbors are worth 100 times what they were a year ago because we're all so isolated. We're all so disconnected. Like I was on a trail running and an older man passed me, this elderly guy, and he gave me a double thumbs up and it made my day. I told my wife about it. Like I'm telling you about it. Like a year ago, I might've been like, double thumbs up seems a little extravagant. Like one thumb would have been enough. But now because we're disconnected, like people will answer the call. Like people will answer their phone just to talk. Like when a neighbor waves at you, you feel like, okay, wait a second, I'm connected to somebody. And I keep telling people, like when you ask someone what they need, they become visible and valuable. And that's what everyone wants to know. You see me and I matter. You see me, I'm visible and I'm valuable. And so that's where compassion for your team, if you're a leader, compassion for your customer, if you're a leader, and then also compassion for yourself. I keep running into business leaders, marriages, like people that'll say to me, John, I feel like I'm in a funk and I don't know why. And I always go, it could be the global pandemic. Like, I'm just going to take a shot here, but like we discount that. And so I keep telling people, like, give yourself lots of grace. This is probably your first global pandemic. Like, this isn't your 10th. Like, this is your, like, so if you're a parent, you're like, I'm the worst at homeschooling. Like, yeah, you should be. You probably suck at hang gliding too, because you've never done that. Like, now you're trying to learn how to homeschool in the middle of a global pandemic, economic crisis. Oh, P.S. election year. Like, this is a challenging year. And if we pretend otherwise, we don't give ourselves grace, we don't give the people around us grace, and we miss the power of compassion.
Yeah. Okay. So I think this is great. You know, the idea that you know, we all need to become more patient with ourselves and with our teams. And I'll just say, even for me, like I'm not you know me, I'm not a patient person. I have a hard time. Like we just started regathering as a church 2 weeks ago, and I'm like, why isn't everybody here? Like like everybody should be here, but like not everybody is doing anything. And most of our church went 6 months without ever walking on our campus or coming in this building. And so there's no habit to that anymore. There's all sorts of things that we could talk about. So, but talk to me about that, because balance that. This is a curveball. We didn't talk about this before, but the thing that strikes me is, so I'm going to give myself a break and our team a break. I'm going to have some compassion, but it's hard to feel like we're winning. You know what I mean? It's like, because the bar that was set before for what winning was is way above where my bar should be now. And I have a hard time going, well, if I lower the bar way down there and I step over it, I don't feel like I'm winning. So talk to me about that, like how to balance those two ideas of giving myself a break, but also, you know, motivating myself to do hard things and accomplish, you know, big goals.
Well, so I guess I'd say a couple things. One, you know, you can only judge this year by this year. So like at every time when you want to compare, like you shouldn't, like this calendar is brand new. Like last year in fall of 2019, you could look at fall of 2018 and go, whoa, we're off track, or, oh, we're on track. Like you can't this year. Like you physically can't. It doesn't make sense. The second thing is, that doesn't mean you have to lower the bar. It means you have to come up with new goals. So you might say, okay, you know, it's kind of be like, if you didn't run for 6 months and then you thought you would run the same rate you did when you quit, the last day you quit, we'd be like, dude, no, you won't. Like, that's not how it's going to work. But there's this part of us, because it's not as obvious, we think everybody should be at church, or our methods should be working the same way. And you also don't, like, a line I keep telling people is the emotional supply chain is disrupted too. Like the emotional supply chain is disrupted too. It's not just bikes that are hard to get. It's not just kayaks or toilet paper. We're all like, when you walk past somebody on a trail and they turn their backs and hide in the woods from you, that has a cost. Like, we've barely begun to understand like all the kind of residual connected things that are happening right now. So I think you have to, one, not compare it to last year, and two, come up with some brand new goals. So you say, okay, we're not going to live this year against last year's standards because it's a brand new year in ways we hadn't anticipated. But that doesn't mean we stop having goals. It doesn't mean we stop being motivated. We just find new forms of motivation, new things we can measure. I'm the same way. Like, you and I are wired that way. Like, I think only in Christ can you be high performing and high peace. Like, outside of Christ, doing both of those things is impossible. And so, like, I want to be high performing. I'm going to try to sell the heck out of my book next spring. I'm going to try to do as many virtual events as I can this fall. But imagine if I held myself to the goal of, I was going to do 30 live events and now I'm doing 0 this fall. I should change my attitude. Or what if I just worked harder? Dude, there's nothing I can do to put those back on the calendar. And the sooner I admit that, and then can do some new goals and go, okay, here's the things I can do. I'm going to work on this. That's where I'm much more peaceful, even as I'm trying to be high performing.
So, and I would say, I mean, and I'm just listening to you, that's a new idea for me. The idea that, and I think it's one of the advantages our leaders have in whatever space they're in, is I can be somebody who can be high performing and not be so stressed out because I realize I'm not really in control. I mean, wouldn't you say that's really it's really the idea that there is somebody bigger, there's something bigger, there always is something much larger, and there's so much more of this that's out of my control than is in my control. And so I can still be driven, I can still be a high performer, and I can also close my eyes and go to sleep at night knowing that the world's not going to fall off its axis because I didn't achieve some specific goal, or something didn't go a way that I thought it was going to go, or somebody's perception or definition of what success is, I didn't live up to.
Yeah, and I think you have to constantly go, okay, God, show me your currency. Show me your currency. Show me your currency. Like, what are the things you value that maybe I'm not valuing right now? What are the things that you're connected to that I'm just not seeing? I mean, that's like, take the talent story where Christ tells the three people get talents, the one, the two, the five. Yeah. I always misread that. I misread it as that lazy one guy. He should have hustled harder. Like, what a slight, like, and it's not about that. It's about he didn't have a relationship with the person, like with the landowner. He thought, you're really selfish. You steal. You're a hard person. So I was afraid. That was about fear. The people that were 5 and 2, immediately it says they got the money and they put it to work. They had boldness because of the relationship. So my prayer in this season is I want boldness because of the strength of my relationship, not results based on the strength of my hustle. Like, my hustle, it's finite. My relationship with God is infinite. And so that's where, in this season, it's hard for high performing people because you want to white knuckle it. You want to double down, triple down, quadruple down. And, what's funny is the world tells you to 10x things, 20x things, 100x. The Bible's like, double is dope. Like, those people went from 5 to another 5. And God was like, that's amazing, dude. You doubled it. Like, so I have to kind of, as a high performing person or trying to be a high performing person, go, man, I doubled that thing. That's awesome. Like, that's really fun. Like, and it's the fruit of my relationship, not because I figured out how to hustle. So I think if you can have that kind of flowing in, like, it's so much easier to have both peace and performance.
That is so good. I was trying to capture that sentence, but before, and it's too far for me to ask you to go back, but you said a sentence for me that is so powerful. It's what I'm going to take away from today. Just measuring your performance by the nature of your relationship, the fruit of that relationship, where what I'm living from. I'm living from this relationship, from the security I have there. I'm living in boldness. I'm living in confidence. I'm living motivated and inspired by knowing this. I'm doing what I've been called to do. I'm living from the power of living out my calling and knowing that ultimately I'm working toward that well done, good and faithful servant comment, not for what numbers I doubled or tripled or 10x'd over last year. Yeah. And again, your point about the hustle and the work, I feel like, and this is taken in a different direction, but I feel like that's so much about us wanting the credit. It's like, if I can show you how much I hustled, then you'll praise me. But actually what the scripture says is we're to work unto the Lord so that people will see our good works. They'll see the things that we accomplish and we do, and they'll glorify our Father in heaven. And so I think that's the powerful
that's
idea.
Different. That's different too, because like I realized this season, I don't want conditional peace. Like in my own power, I can create conditional peace. If these things happen, if I earn this, if I do this, I get the condition of peace. Where I don't want that. I want, despite my circumstances, despite what's going on, I want peace that surpasses that. And that's a different type of peace. And then, so yeah, I just think a good prayer is, okay, God, show me how to have high peace and high performance, because that's only available in you. Or also like, show me how to be an amazing foot. Like that's like 1 Corinthians, where we go, okay, some people are hands, some people are foot. Right now is a season for a lot of people to feel confused and go, okay, I know I'm a foot, but I gotta be a better hand. That, why am I not a hand? And so like resting in the moment of being like, nah, I'm an amazing foot. I suck at being a hand. Like, and I do. And so when I hold back and go, okay, these things matter more, like my performance gets all out of whack as I try to be somebody else. And so I think that's another good prayer. Another good prayer is, God, show me the things I'm supposed to do that I'm not doing out of fear, and show me the things I'm not supposed to do because I'm not supposed to do them. Like that's a fork that you come to, that you as a leader have to go, okay, I've been avoiding this because I'm going to look silly and I'm going to stumble and it's new and I got to do it. God's calling me to it. Or also, I'm not supposed to do this. This is somebody else's mission. Right. It's somebody else's gift. And the gifts I have right now are already enough. Like if I started every day from a place of enough versus a place of let me earn my identity, like that's where things start to change. Man,
that's so good. All right, Jon, I want you to commit before we wrap up here that you're going to be a regular. We're going to have you back, and we're going to do this more than one time.
I'm very expensive, Joel. I'm very expensive. I want to be upfront about that.
Okay, good to know. Good to know.
Look at these books. Look at all these books. I got to buy books and stuff.
Well, I'll just call your wife, and she'll make you do it. So that's I got to.
You can call my wife, you can call Reggie Joyner, you can call Andy, like you have 7 people you can call.
Well, this has been so good and so helpful. Before we end the call, you have a new book that's coming out. And I'm not just doing this for promotion because Jon's a friend of mine. Jon's content, as you can tell, he always has incredible content. You wrote a book on overthinking called Soundtracks. Is that correct?
Yep.
And it's coming out, and you've been kind enough to offer a chapter of that book to all of us. And so for our audience that's listening, all they got to do is text Soundtracks to 44222, 44222, the word Soundtracks. Tell us a little bit about Soundtracks real quick before we get off, and what they can look forward to in this first chapter.
So I talked to you about the 3 circles: need, market, personal connection. I commissioned a research study with a PhD named Mike Peasley. We asked 10,000 people if they struggle with overthinking, and 99.5% of people said yes. And so it's this huge need. And that was before the world kind of went on pause and fell apart. And so like I feel like I spent 2 years learning how to deal with overthinking, and the world got covered with water and I already knew how to swim. And so I can't wait for it to come out. But essentially the idea is, a lot of times we talk about overthinking, we say, stop it. But wouldn't it be better? Like, why would I ever turn off this amazing, efficient machine of my thinking? What if I just figured out how to think the right things I chose, not things that just showed up? Most people don't understand they get to pick their thoughts. Even my most type A friends who lay out their clothes the night before the gym because they know it'll increase the chances of them going, don't lay out their thoughts before a big meeting. They don't say, hey, on Tuesday, I'm talking to this person. Here's the 3 soundtracks that I want playing while I'm having this meeting. Or, hey, wow, I need to retire this and replace the soundtrack. And the research is fascinating. And so we took people through a big research study. It's really, really fun. And it's one of those things that I think it's going to be my biggest book because of the need. I just think there's a tremendous need. Wow. And when you learn how to think differently, like you get to spend time with somebody you enjoy, which is yourself, versus having this kind of thought process, that tends to be negative, like your brain never brings up things you won at 6 years ago unexpectedly. Like there's no, scientists have studied, there's no English word to capture, there's no opposite of trauma. Like trauma will find you at the grocery store and go, remember 4 years ago when you said that thing? There's no opposite of that where your brain goes, just wanted to give you this amazing memory of this thing that happened. And so you have to consciously say, this is what I'm going to think, and here's how I'm going to think. And it's, from a Christian it's a business book, but we would know from a Christian perspective, It's renewing of the mind.
Yeah.
It's saying, beautiful, here's what I'm going to focus on. So I can't wait for it to come out, but I hope people like the first chapter.
That's awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to reading it. So thank you so much for your generosity in that and your generosity in this conversation today. Really appreciate you. Please tell Jenny and the girls I said hello. It's been way too long since I've seen them. And I look forward to chatting with you again in the future.
Yeah, it'll be fun. See you, Joel.